Hey everybody, today I'm going to be diving into Azure Private DNS Zones, and I'm going to show you exactly how to create one step by step. But first, really quick, let's make sure we understand what this actually is and why you would want to use it. So, what is Azure Private DNS Zone? Think of it as your own internal DNS, right? Internal phone book, but for Azure resources. Instead of relying on Azure's default naming system, which, as you know, is not going to work for whatever architecture you have. So that's why you're Googling this and that's why you're searching this up. You can have your own custom domain names for resources inside your own virtual networks. Here's the key thing. These DNS records are going to work only inside your Azure environment. They're not going to be visible or resolvable from the public internet, which is it's good for internal applications, databases, and private endpoints. And the way it works is it's pretty straightforward. What you're going to do is create a private DNS zone right here, contosointernal.com, whatever it may be. Essentially, all it is a DNS zone, just like you have on your on-premises Active Directory, A records for resources. For example, a virtual machine. For simplicity's sake, we're going to be using the virtual machine example here. VM1 gets this IP, VM2 right here gets this IP, VM3 has that IP, VM4 has that IP. Now, that's all a private DNS zone is. All of this information is actually useless if you do not link it to a virtual network. Okay? So, when we are linking a virtual network to a private DNS zone, we are essentially saying, hey, this entire network, use this for DNS. Okay? And what it's going to do is anytime VM1 does a NS lookup, a DNS query for VM3, it's going to search the private DNS zone. So Azure provides DNS servers at IP address 168.63.129.16 that handle this automatically when you're using default DNS settings. So if you have a VM trying to reach, for example, VM3, Azure is going to check your private DNS zone first, find the record, and then it's going to return the private IP address. There's also this other cool feature called auto registration, and when you enable this, Azure automatically is going to create and delete DNS records as you deploy or remove virtual machines. So you don't have to manually add these records in all the time. So when do you want to use private DNS zones? The most common scenario is if you're setting up private endpoints for Azure services like storage accounts or SQL databases so that you're able to talk to them through a private IP. That's when you would want to use private DNS zones. Another thing would be just to create friendly names for internal applications that only need to be accessed within your own Azure network. Another thing would be building a hub and spoke network architecture where multiple VNets are going to need to share DNS resolution. Before I jump into the setup, there are a few restrictions that you need to know about, and these can trip you up if you're not aware. So your private DNS zone name must have at least two labels. So contoso.com is going to work, but just contoso is not going to work. It needs to have the dot separator. And second, you cannot create a child zone delegations using name server records like you would with public DNS. If you need a child domain, you need to create it as a completely separate private DNS zone. And third, Azure blocks certain zone names to prevent conflicts like azure.com, windows.net, and other Microsoft-owned domain. Makes sense. I don't know why you would want to use those, but it's good to know. Finally, there is a limit here. You can have up to 1,000 private DNS zones per subscription, and each zone can be linked up to 1,000 virtual networks. For most scenarios, that is enough, but if you're building at a massive enterprise scale, this is a good number to keep in mind. So that's pretty much it for what you need to know. Let's go into the how to actually build it out. So once you have your virtual machine set up, for example here, and your virtual networks, what you're going to want to do is look up private DNS zones, create a private DNS zone, name it something. I'm going to call it pdnslab.com. I'm going to deploy it in the same resource group as the rest of my stuff. I'm going to go here. I'm going to skip this, but if you wanted to, you can upload a private DNS zone file in here, and it'll automatically add all the records in there. I don't have one, so I'm just going to skip next. And here, I'm going to link my private DNS zone to my virtual networks. Remember, this is all we're doing right here. We're just linking the private DNS zone to a virtual network. Okay? So that's what we're doing here. I'm going to link it to VNet 1. And I'm going to enable auto registration. And if you don't remember, this allows the virtual machines connected to the virtual network to have automatic creation and deletion of the DNS records. So yes, I want that. And what this is going to do is, as soon as we link this and create the private DNS zone, all the virtual machines in this virtual network VNet 1 are automatically going to have a record in the private DNS zone. So let's go ahead and add a link to each VNet that we have. I'm going to enable auto registration again for this one, and then finally the last one, auto registration. And as soon as we're done with this, I'm going to hit create. So the private DNS zone is done deploying, and I'm going to show you here that my virtual networks are already peered. I'm going to type in the FQDN in here. You're going to see that it does resolve. So we're going to go look at the records, and you will see Zabbix server is 10.1.04.4, and you can see it's working. And again, this one is working as well. So that's all you have to do, is link the private DNS zone to the virtual network. And if you want these VMs across different virtual networks to be talking to each other, make sure that the VNets are actually are peered as well. So that was pretty much it for how to set up a private DNS zone. If you have any questions at all, feel free to leave a comment. I'll respond, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.